Good morning, everybody. Welcome. uh, Running a little bit behind this morning, so I do apologize. Let me adjust my camera here, so I'm a little bit more in shot. All right. Hope everybody's having a good morning. I am little little tired today. We had a late night last night, Jen and I. But morning, grumpy old Slan. Welcome. We're going to be talking about Pulp Alley today. And so, if you know me, you know that I am not just about role playing games. I am as much, if not more so sometimes, about miniatures games. Um, and this is one of my favorites. Um, Actually, getting to this game took a bit, but and that's really just more a matter of um, the journey I had with pulp miniature gaming. Period. Um, no, it. I would like to say blame it on the time change, but I can't. I just stayed up too late, and I know that my old body does not like to stay up past midnight, and we did so anyways. And then I also know equally that my dog is an asshole, and is going to wake me up at 6:30 regardless of whether I slept well or not. So I am up. I've been up the last couple hours babysitting him so my wife could sleep. So she's still in bed, and here I am. You may hear him barking because when he's by himself in the house, the world is ending. All right, so let me start out with um, kind of how I got to Pulp Alley and why I gravitated towards this. Um, I'm a huge pulp genre fan. Uh, but finding miniatures games that suited me and my idea of what I wanted from pulp took a bit of doing. There's a lot of sets out there that you can that play in that setting in that genre, but they don't really play the genre all that well. I've played various Victorian science fiction settings back in the day, and they kind of got close, but didn't really nail it. And then I've role played in pulp settings before, but um, finding a miniature skirmish game, especially, was tricky. And I originally started out playing a game called 45 Caliber Adventure, um, and that really caught my imagination, and I went full into it. At the time, I was playing with a group of folks who, and they're still part of my gaming group. They're just not in the same state as me anymore, and really good friends. But that group of players generally like to play things that they could pull off the shelf and off the pegs. And so, if I was going to bring anything new to the game, or to the group, I would have to generally deliver the entire package to get them going. So with 45 caliber adventure, I dove in head first, bought a bunch of bought the core rules, a bunch of the supplements, bought them in PDF, printed them out into 3-ring binders, and then I just started grabbing all kinds of miniatures from various companies like Cobblestone and Pulp Miniatures and Artisan, some old Glory stuff that fit the genre, and just really started going in to build up a body of figures. And you can always tell when I'm really into something because I actually paint figures from that. And I had a good majority of what I had bought painted up. I mean, I even picked up a German U-boat crew because it seemed like a great, just a canned, uh, warband league, whatever you want to call it, to play. Anyways, I went in and did all of this before really having a chance to play the game. And so I demoed it for my group, and we all universally just agreed that it was not the system for us. 45 caliber adventure, one of the problems we had with it was is that it was too easy to end up with a character who was still in the game but useless. And I'm very much of a mind that while I don't mind miniatures becoming less useful in play, taking wounds, having stats diminish, whatever, having a miniature that's still in play but really is useless just annoyed us all. So, um, really was crestfallen on that. Was hoping that the guys would dig it, especially considering I went in so bad on it. And I mean, that's on me. That's not on them. I mean, I dove in headlong before we even had a chance to play it. So those figures languished around for a while, and eventually I sold them off because I was just nobody seemed to want to touch Pulp again. And so a few years went by, and this game came out. In its early days, it was supported on a forum, um, and really active group there. I picked up PDFs of it originally, um, and then I really enjoyed this version. And I'll get into how it's put together, but it was night and day. So while 45 caliber adventure was a lot of really micromanagey stuff that then left you with useless figures on the board, Pulp Alley had a similar feel, but at the same time, and I do apologize for the dog. He's going to bark if you can hear him. He's just up there going off. But with Pulp Alley, your characters were in it, and it really focused on playability and fun and ease of play and keeping your eyes on the table and very rarely going back and forth through books. And it was just such a joy. When I got into it, I was able to get my 6 year old at the time to play with me. And, they actually won their first game against me, and I wasn't even going easy on them. They just made good decisions, and the dice didn't like me. So, Pulp Alley. Uh, Other reasons to love it. It is designed by a dad and his kid. If you look at the cover, and I'll pull up a larger version of it here, you'll see that it says Phipps and daughter right on the cover of the rules. Dave Phipps and his daughter Mila were very active in the early days. Not sure what's happened with Mila. I'm going to venture a guess that she's probably gone on to college or whatever, that kids her age do. But she was in there making terrain with him and painting miniatures, and they were a team. And so I gotta respect that. I gotta love that. um, Dave absolutely loves this game. He is this game's biggest cheerleader, and I know that sounds stupid, but a lot of games I run into, I feel the designers either don't seem to really care about it once it's out in the wild. And that's not necessarily a dig at their dedication to the game, but a lot of designers are very much like, okay, it's done. I got to move on to the next thing. They're always moving on to that next thing. Um, or they put forward a very plastic um, marketing voice when it comes to promoting their game. Dave is such a giant nerd geek slash goof about his game, and it's infectious. He loves seeing people share ideas. He loves to answer questions on the Facebook group that they have for it now, and I've provided the link to that in the description of the video. Also, link to their store where you can pick it up. He is working on this game constantly. I have nowhere near all of the stuff that's out for this game. Uh, but at the same time, this is a game that plays um, with as little or as much as you want, and so um, that is the benefit of one of the big benefits of Pulp Alley as well is that you can play lots and lots of games with just the core rules, and that's that's a big deal. There's plenty else to do, but yeah, you can go with just the basic core rules. So, all right. So, before I go into this too much, you saw the Pulp Alley rulebook. Um, it is a digest style rulebook, size rulebook, softbound. I believe he has a hardbound version of it, um, but I don't know if that was a special edition or if that is generally available. He does have a nicely put together um, starter set, which is all you need to get going right there in the box. And so it's always good. It's always a good way to go as well. The game, let me jump into how the game plays. So the basics of Pulp Alley are you have a league, and that's what they call their war bands. And your league is made up of characters of various levels. You have a leader, you have a sidekick, and the numbers of these characters may vary, including the leader. But there's a leader, there's a sidekick, there are allies and followers. Those are the four levels of characters, four basic levels of characters. There are also gangs, but I'll get into those later. Um, and so each league is made up of 10 slots, and so there aren't specific points in this game. There are slots, because the game is not about super balance. There's an attempt at balance, but the game is not so worried about balance that everything is pointed down to the minimum. So each character has a number of dice that it gets to distribute in various numbers. And so, for example, a leader character might get 3 dice at D10, or 3 stats at D10, 3 stats at D8, or I think it's 4 stats at D10, 2 at D8. And then you also get a number of stats at X number of dice and a number of stats at so it comes down to combining numbers of dice with the type of dice, for the various statistics, and that creates a great amount of variety. And of course, so leaders have higher dice than sidekicks, sidekicks have higher dice than allies, and allies have higher dice than followers. And so, in addition to your dice that you distribute, you're then going to pick up abilities for your guys. And the abilities are expressed as level 1, 2, 3, and 4. And there's a huge list of abilities. Um, and so a leader will get 4, a sidekick gets 3, a follower gets 2, or excuse me, an ally gets 2, and a follower gets 1. And then they often are capped at what level of abilities they can get. So leaders can get up to level 4 abilities, sidekicks can get up to level 3 abilities, allies can get up to level 2 abilities, and followers can only get level 1 abilities. um, the abilities are everything from bumps to your stats, so like an extra die, or you like bump it up a die code, to specific abilities, like mesmerize and stuff like that. And they're all thematic, and there are some, for example, that will even modify your stats and give you really good bonuses. So, for example, let's say you had 1 point left in your league, and you didn't want to put it on just a gunman, like a follower. You could build a follower, give him the level 1 ability that is called Animal. And Animal means now that he doesn't have any shoot dice at all. He can't shoot, but now he gets 2 dice to distribute to um, his physical abilities. Which is cool because now you can actually then throw like a dog or a monkey or something into your league. And whatever your theme is, for example, and it doesn't have to necessarily be just some random guy that you just spent your extra points. Now I'm going to interchange points and slots, but it's mind you, there are no actual points in this game. There are slots. Now your league slots. I remember earlier I mentioned there are 10 of those. You get 10 slots per league. Uh, are also spent on perks. Now, league perks are things that affect the league as a whole. And some of these are just little bumps. For again, for example, you can get like a followers perk, which means that your league has some followers, or you might have contacts or gadgets. And these are abilities that allow you to roll at the beginning of each game to see if you get extra gear or an extra person who joins up with you. And a lot of them can be banked. So if you're playing a campaign, you can build those up. So maybe you don't want to just take a level 1 follower uh, for your contacts, or excuse me, for your followers this turn. This game, you want to build something more. You want to save it until you might need it, and then maybe you'll be able to get like a sidekick level character later on, in addition to what you normally have in your league. But perks also modify the structure of your league, and that's one of the things I really like. So standard league, like I said, is about 10 slots, and I find that 10 slots usually gives me around 5 to 6 characters if I don't mess with the structure of the league. And that's a nice playable group. Um, However, there are ways to modify your leagues through your perks that change out the character makeup. For example, if you take the mastermind perk for your league, you don't have a leader on the field. Your leader of your league is a mastermind. They're behind the scenes. However, your sidekick now gets to function as the leader, but you also get extra slots for that league. So this is a great way to build leagues that might be, say, because of course in Pulp Alley you're going to be making good guy leagues and bad guy leagues because it's usually competitive. I try to have a little of both myself. So generally, and also depending on the genre, I like to have one good guy and one bad guy league for all. So I can play either side of the field. But you could have two competing good guys or two competing bad guys. Um, but what the mastermind now does is it allows you to really nicely create those leagues that might be like a ninja clan or a group of mercenaries, something where the ultimate leader of the group is not on the field, maybe a sergeant or a lieutenant or a warlord or something like that. So yeah, the perks are really neat in that way. And I'm just doing this in broad strokes because there's a lot to get into it, and I'll probably, if people respond nicely to this one and there's some more interest, I may actually do some how tos. But let me jump into a couple of things. So as far as what's available, and this is just going to be kind of a brief little dip in there. So I showed you that there is the starter set and there's the rule book. There's so the basic rules has rules for vehicles, but if you want a nice expanded set of rules, they have the pulp vehicles rules. Um, this provides some handy templates as well for when you're playing. I mean, again, Dave has thought about a lot of things when it comes to the makeup of this game. So in the game, for example, you might have a vehicle model on the board, but you don't want to necessarily pile all your models onto that vehicle model. There are templates for the vehicles that have seating spots that you can then place your miniatures onto while you're playing, so they're not falling off the board and everything like that. Uh, so in it, we got the vehicles. There is uh, this book came out. This is the Pulp Leagues book, and this is neat because this is just a bunch of sample leagues. This is like if you really wanted to just have some stuff to get into the game, you have this. The main rules do have some sample leagues. But yeah, this is as the game has been developed, Dave has sort of a revolving cast of leagues that he's created that he likes to highlight in both his in-house miniatures range, uh, uh, and then also through his league write-ups, and he put them in here. There are campaign books like Tomb of the Serpent. There's the first one that came out was called Perilous Island. And it's kind of an homage to King Kong, and so with a little bit of Cthulhu. But Tomb of the Serpent, of course, kind of speaks for itself. Um, and so gameplay. is done through a combination of die rolls and a standard set of cards um, that uh, run through the whole game. So the game has the fortune deck and then rewards. Now, rewards are exactly what they say, but the fortune deck is the big thing. So as you're playing and you are rolling dice for your characters, and when they do things, you're also drawing from a fortune deck at the top of every turn. Should also mention that every game takes 6 turns generally, but it's a you have a limited time, limited turn length for the game. Fortune cards play in 2 ways, which is neat. So you have, let me pull up one here from one of my games. You'll see here, this is says trip up at the top, and then there's a challenge at the bottom. So there are times in the game where you will draw from the fortune deck to determine the challenge you have to complete to pick up one of the objective markers. Um, and the objective markers are how you get experience and victory points. And so if this was played on me as it was played during the challenge as the draw from the challenge, you'll see it says challenge roll 1 success with finesse. And so I would roll my character's finesse, however many dice it is, and I'm looking for 1 success. If I fail, um, I get hit. Would take 1 hit if it's failed. That's only if it's being played as a peril, not as necessarily a challenge. There's some nuance there. Not going to go into that right now. You'll see at the top, however, on this, at the top on this here, that there is some other text, and this card might be sitting in your hand, or it could be in the fortune deck. And if it's sitting in your hand, you can see that play when an enemy activates, and the effect is the enemy may not move more than 3 inches. This activation. And that's because you played a trip up on them. And these add a very cool set of system of dynamism into the game, where it's not just move and shoot. It's not just move to the point, spend a turn, get it. So like when I get to one of the victory points, plot points is what they're called. When I get to one of the plot points, I will have to go through a challenge, and I will have to keep trying to go through that until I pass it. And then once I get it, it's mine, and then I move around. But if my character gets taken down, he drops that, or I can hand it off. There are even cards that'll let you steal plot points. But yeah, so the card mechanic is really thought out, nicely thought out. In addition, you'll see there's numbers here and little symbol codes. These even play into the game, um, as far as like how for like solo play or randomized events during gameplay, certain cards, for example, might activate when a certain symbol comes up, and or that numeric value. Sometimes you might have an effect that is X, and then you'll draw that one of those. You'll draw a card from the fortune deck, and whatever that number is equals X. So it's really well thought out. It keeps you looking at the board, looking at the table. So what do leagues look like? Um, real quick, looks like we're up to 3 people. So welcome. If you haven't shouted out yet, please do. Well, let's see who's here. Grumpy, if you're still here. This is Pulp Alley. If you're just joining up, so I'm going to go ahead and throw up some images here of leagues that I have built. So one of the first ones I did was these guys, and I love these guys. Some of these pictures are older. I'm not in the habit of taking pictures over and over and again, and some of them don't have finished bases. But uh, this is the Gold Llama and his sidekick Talaga, who is a Yeti who he saved in the Himalayas, and is now his driver, Major Domo. Good point. Good time to mention that Pulp Alley is miniatures agnostic. You can use whatever miniatures suit your fancy. This is a Super Figs character, and this is a Judge Dredd miniature. This is from the Ape Gang, but I could not pass up an orangutan in a bow tie carrying a crowbar, especially when I had this character as sort of a um, salute to the shadow in a way. In a lot of ways, he's got Iron Fist's colors, but he's very much kind of like the shadow, trained in the Himalayas, blah blah blah. But the car in the background, that's a 156 diecast period vehicle, Styro ruins. Um, so that is the Gold Llama. This is Countess Velasco and her group of treasure hunters. These figures were painted at a time where I had a dull coat that was anything but. So if they seem a little shiny, I apologize. I'm not the best painter, but I do get it painted. So you have Countess Velasco. She's the rich Italian treasure hunter. You have her mystic over here, and then her henchie, who's kind of her tough guy, and then two hired guns. And so these guys are a league of bad guys, whereas the Gold Llama was a hero group. Let's see. Um, this is an interesting one. I think, at least, this league was created out of figures that I had originally purchased to be NPCs in scenarios. And as you can look, as you look at them, they all seem kind of not the most heroic type, but altogether they make a really good sort of Lovecraftian investigation group, where they're kind of normal folks. We've got the leader here and her adventuring self. Got Middle Eastern gentleman back here. We've got sort of a sword cane wielding uh, intellectual guy. I believe his name is a spoof on like three different writers. There's a German guy in the background. We have an Italian guy, and then a couple of Americans. This is a brother and sister that are in there. And these characters are, and she's Scandinavian. I can't remember which country I made her from, but um, uh, they were this international group of investigators that all very low power characters. I believe this league is built using one of the league perks that does away with the the leader level character, and then also has a perk that gives it more sidekicks. I believe it is. Uh, there's uh, there's a really cool perk that pretty much gives you a core league of like four sidekicks, which is really useful. And then the neat thing is like a lot of those league perks you can patch them together to create really different formations. I have one league I'm working on. I'm still working at getting the miniatures for it. That is a group of World War One German soldiers that have turned to mercenary work in the post-war, and that league uses the gang rules and is something like 17, 18 figures big. So they can get pretty large. This is actually a pretty large league as standard leagues go. You've got, you know, you've got 7 figures here. That's pretty big for a league. It's about the upper level of what you'll usually see, unless you start getting into things using gangs. I've mentioned that a few times, so I should probably explain. Gangs are um, single entities made up of multiple miniatures. So whereas the lowest level of standard league character is the follower, and the follower can still take some hits before it goes out. A gang is 5 to 6 figures that move as a kind of a blob, a unit, and their damage output is determined directly by how many are left in their unit. And instead of rolling to see if they get injured every time they take a hit, just when they take a hit, they lose a guy. So they are your absolute mooks. So they're great things for putting in as like hordes of zombies, or um, masses of tribesmen or soldiers. If you were doing uh, sci-fi, they could be your stormtroopers. And so, yeah, this is it's I'll get into how flexible this game system is later. Let's see. So we got those characters. Here's another fun one. This is my Lost World Hero League. This is basically a orphaned Atlantean boy, the mythical Sabretooth that adopted him and raised him, two cavemen who were kicked out of their tribe for being too smart, and then the undead prince of a race of lizardmen, and they're all heroes in the Lost World. So already seeing that Pulp Alley leagues can vary really widely. What does a board look like? Um, well, pretty much anything. Here's one I set up real quick. This is the one I played against my 6-year-old. This is a river running down the middle of it. We have some ruins, some jungle terrain. Hey, RPG Grandma. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. This is the one my 6-year-old kicked my butt in. The river down the middle, that was just a piece of fabric my wife had laying around. So we snipped it and put it in there. All that terrain is built by me out of various things. I mean, these little palms you see back in the background, those are pine cones that have been chewed on by squirrels and left a really cool um, husk. And then I just put some tufts, some fake plastic plants on the top of them. They look like prehistoric plants. Let's see. So another board. This is one I ran as a demo at a local shop. You'll see these ruins get a lot of use. But this was a nice standard scenario. This is there's kind of a hit and run shootout scenario. That's sort of the basic one. That it's a good demo game because you basically get in there and shoot. Measurements. This game uses a standard measurement of 6 inches for movement. Everybody can move and then take an action. Shooting and fighting does it not count as an action, which another nice element that was put into this game. It's all supposed to be about action, action, action. So doing stuff doesn't cost you your ability to fight. And when you fight, both sides fight. So if I shoot at you and you have shooting dice, you get to roll back, or you can dodge for cover. If you do hits to me in shooting and I do hits to you in shooting, we both take damage. So nobody is sitting back waiting for the other guy to finish. Initiative in the game is you determine it up front who has the initiative, and then initiative is held until it's taken. And initiative doesn't mean that you get to go first all the time. Initiative means that you are the director, and the director calls the shots. And really, it's basically he just gets to pick who activates. He doesn't get to pick which figure, but what activation order is. So, like if I'm the director, I'll go, okay, I'm going to move one of my figures. I'll move one of my guys. I'm going to move one of my figures again. I'll move a different one of my guys, and then I could get there and maybe I want to see what you're thinking based on what I did. So I'll go like, okay, well you can move one of yours, and you move. And you're like, okay, that's interesting. I want to see where you're going. Okay, go ahead and activate again, and you basically the director will run that back and forth until all figures have activated. All right, well, have fun. Thanks for stopping by. It's a fun game. I'll talk more about what it can do in a little bit. But during that play, if there are two ways to steal the initiative, to steal the director's chair, so to speak, you either claim a plot point. Claiming a plot point immediately shifts the initiative over to the person who claimed it, or you have a decisive victory, a decisive battle. And a decisive battle is defined as a battle in which you inflict wounds on the opponent but don't take any. Not hits, but wounds. So every time you attack somebody, you'll determine how many hits you do, and then they will roll to see if they take a wound. And if you do any wounds. I should also mention that the cool thing about this game system is while instead of having the numbers you're shooting for all the time change, the die type changes, and you have a standard target of 4+ on whatever die you're rolling to equal a success. And so you're rolling multiple dice at multiple different die levels. Die ranges go from D6 to D12. Um, D12 is hard to get with a starting character. Starting character dice are D6 is usually, unless you take an ability that gives you a bump up. There are no D20s, and I don't believe they use D4s. Um, you can use all kinds of toy store dinosaurs. This is an Allosaurus that came painted that way. It's got a posable jaw. Great dinosaur model. In the background, you could see that I was using um, basically fish tank terrain. This is a plastic dollar store scorpion that makes a excellent giant scorpion. You can kit bash stuff and stuff. This is a crazy frog demon that I made, um, and this was done out of a dollar store frog and a lot of green stuff and some toothpicks. And now I have a Lovecraftian horror. Let's see. We have also played games in Dwarven Forge. This was a game that was played in the dungeons under Castle What's-It-Stein. And this was done as there's a ticking time bomb. So I can never remember the names of the scenario, but basically, this scenario starts with one side's leader, basically the bad guy leader, already in place, getting ready to do the final thing, whether that's a bomb or a ritual or whatever. That's up to you. The scenarios are often very generic, which is nice because it allows you to flex them. And then the rest of the leagues have to, the rest of the fight is trying to to run interference, so the one league's leader can finish the ritual while the other league is trying to stop them. And so this was a fun one. There's even a secret door right here, where they had this big pile of machinery and stuff. So there's to explain some things here. So in the game, there is terrain is generally considered a line of sight blocker, but it doesn't usually limit movement. Rather than limiting movement, Dave has come up with a system of terrain conditions. So basically, any sort of normal terrain feature on the board is, if I'm remembering correctly, it's considered perilous. And perilous terrain means that when you move through it, I have the option to play a peril from my hand, and then you will have to take a test. And the neat thing is these tests are never defined up front. So it might be that the card I throw down says 2 successes on cunning as you're trying to move through a thicket. And what does that mean? It doesn't matter. We're going to create that narrative in our head, and that's the nice thing. One of the nice things about this game. So you have to do 2 successes on cunning. Okay, so maybe the thicket is really thick and tangled, and you have to figure out your way through it. As opposed to maybe if it was 1 success on strength, you just had to snap your way through it. But you had to stop and do the peril because I played the card. There is then extremely perilous terrain, which would be things like, that rickety old bridge, or in this scenario, this room was considered extremely perilous because it had a fuel dump in it. And extremely perilous terrain, you pull a card from the fortune deck because you automatically have to face a peril going through that terrain. That could be anything from, like I said, the crumbling bridge, the geyser field, a minefield, anything that is definitely going to be dangerous to move through anytime you go through it. So it's there's a lot of fun little nuance to the game. So there are all sorts of accessories um, out there, for this game, and different, different sets of cards are available. This is for the Shadow Legacy set. You have the solo booster, because there are solo rules in this, um, which is a bunch of cards that are specifically designed to facilitate the AI of the monsters on the board. Let's see. Oh yeah, got mummies. This is a conversion I did for a mummy that's covered in scarabs. Um, but yeah, so the game is just so full. Here's the horror deck. There are specific horror rules. Um, hey, Bishop, how's it going? Dodge for cover. Dodging for cover is generally a good idea in Pulp Alley, but I do love the option to shoot it out. Um, and hand to hand is done really cool as well, because in hand to hand you can try to dodge, um, and then you can roll dice against each other. You're still rolling dice against each other, and then we start matching them up. So let's say I'm rolling 3d10, and I'm just going to make it easy. Let's say I roll 3d10 and you roll 3d10. We can choose to each go all out and do as much damage as we can. I should say that the defender can. The attacker's always going all out, but the defender has the option. Before you roll, you can choose to dodge, and then you'll roll your dodge dice, or you can attempt you can choose to fight back, and you roll your brawl dice. Um, so I'd be rolling my brawl dice as the attacker, and you'd be rolling your brawl dice as the defender. As the defender, you can choose to go all out, or you can choose to block. And so in blocking, you're going to look for matchups. So let's say I roll a 7 and you have a die that's 7 or more on the die result, you can block my 7, and that's one less hit that you took. And let's say I roll a 5 and you have a 5 or more, you can block that die. Let's say I have a 4 and you only had a 3 left, I still got one through. And so there's this really dynamic combat system where if I attack, anytime you're attacking somebody, they're having an opportunity to fight back. So nobody's sitting there and watching their figures get picked off of the board and feeling like they don't have a chance to do anything. Uh, uh, Weapons don't have range. Weapons don't even have specific stats. There are optional rules for that if you want something a little grittier. But one of the beauties of this game, and I'm going to say that over and over because there's so much to love about this game, is the fact that you have a shooting skill and a brawling skill, and then you have perks. And so your shooting skill and your brawling skill are very just generic. Your high shooting dice can represent a high caliber gun, or it could represent that you're just really good with your gun. Um, there are perks that will let you simulate other sorts of attacks. Like you might have, let's say, for example, let's see, Bronzini in Countess Velasco's league. Uh, well, actually, let me get this up here again. So Bronzini, who's this guy here, he has a bar. And so he has a high shoot dice to reflect the fact that he's chucking 30-06 ammunition. And but he also has the burst ability. The burst ability allows me to throw a template onto the table, and that template will hit everybody within that template, but also that template stays. And so I can put down covering fire with Bronzini to kind of help control the battlefield. That simulates his gun. Um, these guys. So this guy here, if I recall correctly, this guy here has a sharpshooter ability that um, does away with his long range penalty. So basically, anything over 12 inches is considered long range. Um, Tables are small. It's a 2x2 table, so it's very, very rare that you're going to be outside of long range. And then this guy, so this guy has a marksman. This guy actually has, I think he has an ability that lets him fire twice or something. I can't remember exactly what it is, but basically they have this exact same stat blocks, except for I think one has higher cunning, the other one has higher finesse, because they're both followers, so they only get one level one ability. Um, but I can't remember exactly how I built them, but yeah, they're both variations on the theme. Uh, but yeah, so not having those specific rules for weapons makes this game so flexible. There aren't any armor rules, but you can get an armored perk or an armored ability. Uh, there there are ways to get armor. There's some gadgets and gizmos that you can get through having some of the gadgeteer perks and not perks, but uh, abilities and stuff. Um, and that kind of leads into one of the other part that I've kind of been hinting at, and that's how versatile this game is. So I've put a link up in the description of the video for Dave's Pulp Alley YouTube channel. And if you go over there, not only does he have cool tips and tricks and how-tos, I mean, one of the reasons I'm not focusing on how to play this is honestly, it's all over there. He's got a playlist for how to play the game that'll walk you through each mechanic at a time. And he's got the camera set up to make it look good. Um, but you will see over there that he plays everything from Pulp Adventure and misty, sweating jungles and ancient ruins to street level gangster mobster stuff, superhero-y type things, low level. You're not going to get X-Men in this game very easily. Um, uh, to Conan type stuff, rockets and ray guns. I have said before you could easily play Star Wars with this game, um, because you have a League of Heroes, you have the gang rules, so there's a way to have plenty of stormtroopers, or you could have a Boba Fett on the other league. It's really easy to do because you can have leagues. I mentioned how big leagues can get. There are rules for a two-person league. There's a league perk called Duo that gives you an enhanced sidekick to go along with the leader to form sort of a Batman and Robin or Green Hornet and Kato, or in the case of myself, I have the Gold Llama and Talaga. They are a duo league. Um, Technically, fifth there's a fifth level of character, and that's kind of generally used only as an NPC for big bads. It's a right monster of a character type, and usually is used to build the monsters. Like in Perilous Island is where it was first introduced. They use it to build the Kong, kind of ape character. Um, but the game has ways to build magicians and sorcerers, undead, robots. Um, you know, if you wanted to do a Tarzan league, I mentioned earlier league perks and how they can modify your league. Well, one of the league perks is you can take animal for your league instead of on the individual character. And when you take animal as a league perk, it allows you to automatically designate any character in your league that you want to as animal without having to use up one of their slots. So let's say you're doing Tarzan. You've got Tarzan on the board. You've got, and then you take animal in the perks. And so now you're going to build your sidekick, and because it's probably going to be the toughest other character in the league, so you want to have Tantor. You want to have his elephant, so you build him as a sidekick. You don't have to take one of Tantor's three, because Tantor as a sidekick's only going to get three abilities, but because you built the league with animal, Tantor can be an animal automatically without having to use his own abilities. And then you might say want a lion because you want Simba, and so you've got your lion now, and he's automatically got an animal. And then you want cheetah, so you're gonna take your chimpanzee figure, you're gonna put it on the board, and now you've got Tarzan and a bunch of his animal buddies. But let's say you also wanted to have Jane in that league. You could make Jane, and she wouldn't have to have the animal ability because the animal league perk says any character that you choose can be an animal. Um, Although animal, again, let me also state that animal does not necessarily mean that the person is an animal. It's a league ability, and I've used it to simulate all kinds of characters who aren't animals, but just don't go around shooting. In my investigators league, there's this guy in the background here. Here, he's a pugilist. He doesn't carry a gun, so I didn't want him to have a shooting stat. So I gave him the animal ability, and now he doesn't have a shooting stat at all, but he gets a buff to his brawling. Also with her, I think she's also using. No, she doesn't. She's got a very low shoot skill, shoot stat, because she's basically just got like a little holdout pistol. They did create. I think Animal must have been one of those ones that people were having a hard time getting their head around, because they did create an ability later on that is identical to Animal, but it's got a different name. I think it's called Pugilist or something like that. But really, your unless it says on the abilities that it can't be used with another ability, there really aren't a lot of limitations on how you can use the abilities, how you can interpret them. And that is at the heart of the flexibility of Pulp Alley. Uh, so if you're building Conan, for example, Conan doesn't have. Let's say you're just doing the sword Conan. You're not going to get into bows or anything like that. Um, you could build him as having a really low shoot stat to maybe show that he does still have shooting. Maybe throws knives or has a bow, but it's not his primary attack. Or you could use animal or pugilist with him. And then there are other abilities that you could do to beef up his combat ability, his fighting ability, or his survivability. Um, it's just this the game doesn't get boring because it's so different every time you play because of the cards. It's dynamic. You're always doing something. Uh, it doesn't go on forever. You only have 6 turns. It's a small table space, so you're right there in the action. Some of the more problematic games I have been ones where I've played on too big of a board because we were just using the table we had or whatever, and that is to the detriment of the game. Um, the way that I always look at Pulp Alley is picking up at that point in the movie. Let's say you're thinking about it as a movie where all of the pre-investigation and kind of the getting there has happened. You're down to the nitty-gritty, and that's when the action happens. You know, when you bust into the warehouse, and the whole board might be the warehouse, and that's it. You're going to sneak around some boxes. You're going to try and get in there and find the documents in the office, or get to the ticking time bomb, or you know find the commissioner's daughter that's tied to the chair. Whatever your scenario is. Hey, Echo, welcome. Um, and then you're right there in the action. You play your game. It's done. There is campaign play already built into the rules. Your plot points will give you boosts. Um, some of them are boosts to things like contacts or extra spiffs that you can then carry over to your other to your following scenarios. There is a card that gives you experience, and then you can actually level your characters up. Your leagues are not fixed. So let's say your concept for your league is something bigger. Maybe it's an organization. You don't have to play the same characters in that league every time. Um, Now, if a character doesn't go on a particular mission, he can't benefit from the any experience that's gained in that particular mission. Um, but you know, he also, you might want to change it out. Maybe one of your characters is down and out because of the post game rule, and you don't want to be down somebody. So you're like, well, Jimmy, you're in now, and so you got Jimmy there, or you've got a big organization like my mercenary unit that I was talking about. Maybe for this particular mission they brought a flamethrower, and so I sub out a flamethrower. But because everything is so stylistic and generalized, you can also play multiple leagues that are the same group of people. Um, a good example would be, I mentioned earlier, let's say you're going to do a ninja clan, right? Well, you might have one league that is just a bunch of generic foot soldiers with a generic lieutenant. And that's sort of your standby, your go-to. But maybe you've got one league that league is built with mastermind, so that it doesn't have a leader character on the board. It's only a highest level character is going to be a sidekick. But maybe you want to have another part of that ninja clan that has some more specialized characters. Maybe there are four mighty ninjas that are in the ninja clan. So now you can use that one league I was mentioning earlier, that league perk that gives you four sidekicks. So now it's going to be a league of four particularly tough guys. Um, or maybe you even want to have a league where the leader is present. And so you do a standard league where you build your league leader in there. Or maybe there's a particularly badass follower, or leader type, like not just a lieutenant, but a captain in your ninja clan. And so you're going to make that league, and that's going to be the leader. But the ultimate leader is still some big dude who's still off screen. You can keep playing with these things all the time, and it's really great. You don't have to get tied up in specifics, and that flexibility is just at the heart of this game. Fast play, heads up play, quick games, just infinite flexibility of creativity, not having to worry about individual gun stats really helps in this game too, because you're never looking. Well, I won't say never. You're very rarely looking up rules for, say, what's the range on that gun? Does it have a special rule, like you do in some other systems? You might have an ability or a league perk that you rarely use, and you occasionally have to look it up. But most of the league rosters have write ups. Have space for you to write in the actual text for your ability. So whether you're using a paper or they actually have cards for league cards. You know, they're like these. Um, they're like these, but they have actual character stats on them. So the game is just so quick. If I was to pull up the standard deck, um, you'll see he even includes little short um, rule summary cards, so you can have those on the table. There is a card that has the order of play. The rule book itself has the turn order on the back cover. It's just it's just so well put together, and he keeps coming up with new stuff. Um, and it is a family operation. Him and his wife play. You know, gets his kids in there. He gets his neighbors in there. It's It's a good game. It's good people. There's a lot to love, and it plays with any figures you want. It plays any genre you want. Um, I mean, if you're getting to super high power levels, you might be challenged in making it fit into Pulp Alley. Like, so you're not going to do a lot of really super heroic superheroes, but you can do you can do a Batman. Reasonable justice to this. You're not going to do Superman, but you could still do a big, tough, invulnerable type character who went around and punched things and even flies. Um, you just you can play anything with it. Um, you know, Dave has one scenario he did where he pulls out a bunch of 15 millimeter science fiction stuff, and it still works. You don't even have to change the measurements. I mean, it's just it because it's so genericized. It's it's really genericized isn't first of all, it's not really a word, but it's not generic. It's open, it's broad, and it's flexible. And I can only say that so many times before it sounds ridiculous. But uh, so we're at that hour mark. I was going to make this a short one because I didn't want to go too overboard. Again, there's nothing I can say here that about the mechanics that isn't going to be done better on the Paul Valley Facebook channel. Um, Go check him out. He runs whole campaigns on there, so you can see campaign play work. But now that I've kind of said everything that I have to say about Paul Belly, I can take questions. There are only four of you here today. It is a lighter stream. Mondays seem to be the better day for my stream, so I might start sliding them over to Mondays. But yeah, um, if anybody has any questions about the game, anything that I was vague on, even I know it's being kind of general, but or anything you wanted to know specifically about the game, by all means, throw it out there. I'd be happy to go ahead and answer the question. Uh, Actually, let me pull this up here real quick. I had mentioned while I'm waiting to see if anybody is. I was mentioning die rolls earlier. So in this particular shoot off here, this was a particularly nasty one. It was somebody with 3 die 10 shooting versus 3 die 6. And so the die 10 person scored 3 successes because there's an 8, a 10, and well, actually, that would be a yeah, yeah, an 8, a 10, and a 10. Excuse me, and then there's a 4 and a 5 on the other side. So it was a 3 to 2. It was a 3 to 2 shootout. Um, but the nice thing is, because the range of dice is kept pretty modest. Uh, I feel like even somebody who's only rolling a d6 is never totally outgunned by somebody rolling d10s because we're all rolling for a result of 4. Um, yeah, Echo, this is a good one to check out, and really can't stress enough that Dave's channel over at Paul Belly is worth checking out. This game system, um, because it's done so generally, you could probably I've even thought about doing um, mass combat, or at least the appearance of mass combat with it. For example, if you were to take a standard 28 millimeter size base, but base a bunch of 6 millimeter figures on it, and then build units using the abilities and the and then armies using the league perks, that could look pretty cool. Um, you could easily do like mecha if you were to want to do say like a Mobile Suit Gundam kind of a thing. Um, you could use it's all there already. You've got a shoot stat, you've got a brawl stat, you've got a toughness stat. Uh, you know, you've got cunning and finesse and dodge and those are all things that a mecha unit and its pilot are also going to have. So you could easily throw this on a board that looks like space, put out some spaceships as your terrain, and mark them as um, very as extremely perilous terrain because they're going to shoot at you if you ever move through them, right? Put everything on flight stands, write up your stats as mecha, and next thing you know, you're playing mecha mass combat. Especially if you bring in the gang rules, it'd be amazing. You could do it. You could do war stories with this because let's say you've got a bunch of bolt actions sitting around, and you don't necessarily want to engage with the nitty gritty of bolt action. You could throw out a 2x2 table with a few squads of guys, um, and have it still play out to take that farmhouse or storm that bunker, and you could string those together to do like a little Band of Brothers or Easy Company kind of campaign and do that. Conan could be done so easily through this because and campaign play. I think Dave actually has a Conan campaign that he's running on his channel right now, and all of his stuff is on there from before too. So it's worth checking out. And also 156 scale uh, die casts are perfect for this, although there's plenty of plastic models. Um, but yeah, this is Pulp Alley. I hope this little primer slash introduction has been useful. Um, it is my favorite pulp game, and frankly, if you had to buy one game to do all of your skirmish play, it's probably the best buy you could make. You can do Wild West with this and not even miss a beat. You just can. I mean, shooting, dodging, brawling, that's Wild West. If you want to throw in a couple other aspects of clue finding and all of that, because you're on the mystery trail of the cattle rancher of the cattle rustlers, well, you got finesse and cunning in there too. You got to go ahead and figure out how to get old Lefty out of the cell in the Huskow. Well, you're going to need cunning and finesse to figure that out as well. There's plot points. Plot points, I mentioned those earlier. They can represent anything and do throughout the scenarios represent everything from actual plot points like information you have to find to the treasures that you pick up. There is one scenario where you have to go from house to house trying to um, find information on somebody. It's it's such a flexible system, and it's scenario driven too. And so I didn't mention this earlier, or if I did, I mentioned it only in passing. Scenarios lay out, what terrain's going to be on the board, what the plot points mean. Um, there are even random rolls for that you can play. You can do at the beginning of each game to say, what is it? Foggy? Is it dark? Is it raining? So all of those factors, with the cards, with the dice, with the pregame rules, the postgame rules, and the scenario rules, you can play the same scenario multiple times and have it, you know, have it play out very different. Hey, Squirrel Hermit, welcome. I was just kind of winding down here. This was going to be a short one today, but I'm still open for questions and comments if anybody has anything to say or wants to know about Pulp Alley. I just picked up the scenario book. Um, he does. I don't think he's doing it right now, but in the past he has done it, and I think he's going to do it again. He used to do a scenario of the month club, where each month he would do a different scenario, and then there would be cards that were made for that. And so you would basically subscribe to it, and each month you would get a new scenario with new cards, and then these get compiled later on. Like he's got his China Station campaign was done as a scenario of the month. The Serpent's Eye was done as scenario of the month. It's really neat. Yeah, it's there, and now he's doing his own miniatures. They're all 3D designed, but very cool pulpy characters. But you don't have to use his miniatures. You can use any of them. I use all sorts of miniatures. I've One of my bad guys, which I couldn't find my picture of him, is this guy. He's my one of my Lost World bad guys. He's Lord Croak. He's an old mage knight, frog with a stone axe, frogman with a stone axe that I decided to write up as the leader of a Lost World gang. He's fancies himself a god, and his little lizard man cronies look to him as a living god. I used a bunch of old Games Workshop plastic skinks I had laying around. I used this old plastic pre-paint that I repainted to make a league. Um, the other Lost World League I did with the Atlantean kid, that was all figures I had left over laying around. The two cavemen are converted berserkers wearing bear skins. The Sabretooth was a Sabretooth I had because Sabretooths. The boy in there is actually supposed to be, he's from a set of miniatures from Alternative Armies and is actually the child version of Cuchulainn, carrying his hurling stick that I just put a special magic stone on the end with some green stuff, and the undead lizard prince on there is a plastic skink with some green stuff on it. Squirrel Hermit, the best place to go is to the Pulp Alley store, which I have actually linked to in the description of the video. Um, Great delivery. His packaging is always really good. He cardboard binds everything that you order. Um, Usually you'll get. He does also like to slip in little samples and freebies, whether that's a sticker or like I got a bonus fortune deck card. No, it was a bonus reward card when I ordered my last order. Um, he even does occasionally he'll do sort of like participation contests, which are neat. He did his Phantom Agent thing for a while. It was really cool. It's basically you would post a battle report within X amount of time, and then you would get a special Phantom Agent card, and it was neat. He's just like I said, he's just really engaged. I mean, and just the biggest cheesiest dork for his own game, and I don't think you can ask for anything more when it comes to a game. You want the person who's making that game to be as in love with that game as you want to be, and he is. Dave is definitely there. He even during COVID, because they were being smart about distancing and all of that. He started running games over um, like uh, over voice and video chat. He would set up a table. He would have a camera showing. He would live stream it. So he would pick a guy off of the Facebook group, and they'd play a game against him. He'd move all the figures and everything, but they could see it. So he's just keeping engaged because before he would have people come in and play, but that was so popular that now that we can all still get together, now that we can get back together in the same space again, he's still doing it because it's a great way to engage the community. And he just does an amazing job. Um, I want I'm in the process currently of catching up on Pulp Alley stuff. Grumpy Old Slan. Yeah, exactly, man. You want the person making the game to be as in love with it as you want to be, and I don't think we see that enough. Uh, you know, we won't even talk about large corporate entities making games because I don't expect that there, even though I know that the truth is that the people designing it usually are. Um, but even some of the smaller shops that really want to put forward that image of being like right there with us all, they don't always have that. I've been to conventions and walked through dealers rooms and um had folks really just seem like they were there to sell me a product. I've also run into people who will step away from from their stand and sit down and run a demo game for me, or stand there and talk to me about why this game that they have is awesome and why I should get it for my kid. It is, yeah, I mean, this right here, it is a genuine labor of love. Dave loves this genre and what it can do. I mean, and he's even willing to test the limits of it. Like I said, he's done some Ghost in the Shell type cyber warfare stuff with it, you know, um, and he's done some rocket and ray gun kind of stuff. The Facebook players group, if you do Facebook, it's and I do. I can't not do Facebook because I actually have a miniatures business. Um, it's it's a lively group. It's a nice group. It's a supportive group. There's an official Facebook page as well. I don't believe he has a Discord. I don't blame him. Discord can be weird for some people, and even though there's an Elfbait Discord, it is not as lively as some other Discords. Um, but it is there, and so you can post. We got miniatures channels there. We've got role playing channels there, and I do post little mini articles now and again when I have an idea about something. But yeah, so we're about 16 minutes over. Haven't seen too many things in the way of questions coming through. Um, but yeah, it's if you like miniature skirmish games, check this one out. You're not going to be disappointed. Um, my wife even likes to play it. Um, she's a gamer, but she's not as huge a gamer as I am. Uh, so Grumpy, you could probably play this online using something as simple as Owlbear Rodeo. Anything that you could make tokens for and you could set up a map for, you could play this because it uses standard dice. The hardest part would be the cards. Um, and I guess that would be the biggest limitation is that it does have a card play aspect to it that you would have to find some way to deal with. Now, that could just be a level of trust and one person has the cards and you just play them up. But because you're supposed to have a secret hand that you play against each other as you play, um, uh, that could make it a little tricky. Um, Streaming would be the best way, but you'd probably still need to have two sets of cards or um, watch how Dave does it because he manages to pull it off with only him having all of this stuff. Um, and so there are ways I think that you could probably adapt the solo rules uh, to play the hand play, the play from the hand. You know, because they say each player has a secret hand. Um, Solo play rules might be able to allow you to mitigate that. I haven't had a chance to play the solo play rules because I haven't had a need for it. Although I'm probably going to get it just so I can. Bunch of locals willing to be on stream. Yeah, you know, if are you saying I should stream it getting played? um, if I actually ever get a camera I could set up, I certainly could do that. I definitely have drawers full of Dwarven Forge for dungeon crawls. Tombs are really easy to build. Um, the it's an excuse to craft terrain. It's an excuse to buy miniatures from all sorts of diverse angles. Um, and it's probably going to get you into your miniatures cabinet and using some of the miniatures you may not have touched for a while because maybe there's certain big buckets of dice games that you bought stuff for back in the day, but you just really you fell out of love with that game and you still want to play in the universe. And you know, I'm talking about a certain game that tends to end in K, but and yeah, but you could play that with this. If you want to do Inquisitor missions, cool. Pull out your Inquisitor miniatures, and then build a league of of bad guys. I guess it's worth mentioning because leagues are so easy and quite honestly fun to make. It is really easy to make leagues that aren't your league, but they're a league that you have in place to just be the bad guys. There are some scenarios that sometimes, like if you get too, I'm sure we've all run into that. And anybody who's collects an army, you get to the table, you're like, well, why are we fighting, right? So, like why would my group of heroic treasure hunters be fighting your group of heroic treasure hunters? I mean, yes, they might be rivals, but there are times where it does make sense. So but with the leagues being really easy to build, it's and fun to build, you can easily have generic leagues that are just stand-ins or kind of your side gig. I sit down and make leagues just for the hell of it sometimes, just to see what I can make. I mean, there is a bit of theory crafting. I mean, people who talk about builds for characters. You can do league builds and see what you can come up with because there's such an interplay between league perks and the abilities of the characters. Um, I my challenge for the longest time was to see how big of a league I could get, how many figures I can get into a league. And I think I mentioned earlier that was like 16, 17, 18 figures in one league using different perks that allow me to get more slots and then using the gang rules. So a gang, mentioned it earlier, is 5 to 6 figures and they take one league slot because no, they take 2 league slots, but they're a group of generic troops. Uh, this is true, and this is what keeps me from generally trying to stream stuff. Is that there's a lot of stuff that it would take to make streams work that I'm not so sure that I would necessarily even want to engage in. That's a whole hobby unto itself. And while I'm totally happy coming on and doing live streams here, and I hope to be getting some actual standalone episodes out once I can get the time to make those. I don't want to spend a ton of money on kits and lighting rigs and all of that, and multiple cameras and all of that. I have a very limited budget, and B, I'm not overly technical, so it's a thing that, yeah, and that's true, but at the same time, do I really want to do that? Um, yeah, there are other people who are already doing a much better job. I'm gonna say it again. Go to Dave's channel, go to the Pulp Alley channel. He's got tons of games streamed. He does one game every Sunday. And he does more than that. So every week there's another game played on that channel. And between that, there are hobby videos, there are how-to videos, there are rules discussions, and they go all the way back. He actually even has a playlist where he's run some of the classic serials too, so it's fun. Yeah, pretty much. I am on my webcam and my headset. I would like to get a standing mic at some point, and maybe some better lighting. But I need better lighting anyways. But my basement here is a work in progress. Uh, links in the discretion. But yeah, so I think I've run out of stuff to say about Pulp Alley without rambling. Um, but it is uh, an amazing game. You should play it. You should get it. You should support Dave and other independents like him. Um, He's been at it a while. I mean, I've been into Pulp Alley long enough to get into it, have it lull, and then get back into it. And it's just it kept getting bigger even while I wasn't actively playing it, and so I'm playing catch up now. There's lots of decks. Um, there are lots of scenarios. He hasn't done a second compilation of compilation scenario book yet. I'm not sure he will, but he does campaigns. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. Uh, I wholeheartedly endorse the starter set. I had all of the stuff that comes with it, so I never got it. But the fact that he has a starter set, I think that's a huge plus for anybody. And the starter set is the complete rule book, um, plus stuff that you need to play. I think it actually comes with miniatures. I can't recall correctly. Let me not steer you wrong. So let me pull it up here real quick. What's in the Pulp Alley starter set? He does have hard copies available too of the rule book that I have is a softbound. I'm a particular fan of the softbound stuff, but there is a hardbound version of it as well. I think I mentioned earlier I wasn't sure if it was available or not, but it's anymore. But it does look to be generally available. Let's see. Yeah, he's definitely worth following. He has some really nice tips too for terrain stuff. So yeah, here it is. The starter set includes metal figures and cards for Dundee Scholars, which is a three-person league, and Minerva's Mercenaries, which is a 5-person league. They're unpainted, and then it also has core rules, um, quick start guide, fortune deck, rewards cards, scenario markers, league cards, character figures, dice. I mean, that's a good set. I mean, it's going to run you $75, but it's worth it. I mean, you're getting a bunch of metal miniatures, a bunch of high grade um, cards, a good rule book, dice, a box. It's all neat. Well, Squirrel, if you ever find yourself in the area, give me a shout. If anything, we can meet at Miniatures Market. It's about 20 minutes drive from my house. Um, let's see. All right, so I'm gonna leave you there with that. Um, saying goodbye is always a trouble I have. Because it's I'm just scrolling down the list of things. Oh, did I mention he offers this stuff as PDFs too? And you get PDFs when you buy the physical copies. But if you're a PDF person, you can just buy the PDFs. So that's an option too. Just so much stuff. Uh, I do suggest if you are going to get the core rule book, even though some of the rules were retroactively lumped back into the core rules because this is the second edition core rules, getting the vehicles book, the vehicles, guns, and gadgets, as well as Vice Alley, um, uh, they're still worth getting because they expand on the vehicle rules. Like you'll get vehicle rules in the main core rule book, but there's so much more in that vehicles, guns, and gadgets book. Um, the the campaigns are always fun to play through. Perilous Island is great. I have not played Serpent's Eye or the Lost World of Lemuria. Vice Alley has a street level campaign in it, which is cool. Uh, all fun stuff. All right. Before I start rambling again, I'm going to say goodbye from here. Please like, share, and subscribe. All that doohickey pandering stuff. All of the links you're going to need are in the description. And you guys have a great rest of your day and get out in game. And if you do pick up Paul Bally and start playing and or painting, please go over to the Discord, the Elfbait Discord, and drop your game reports, your experiences, or even your questions and ideas in the pulp section over there. Have a good one. Hey, Bessie, that is the other half of the Pulp Alley juggernaut. Thanks for coming by. You caught me right at the end, but I hope you've been lurking the whole time. Have a good day, everybody. Take care.